What are regions, availability zones, and data centers in the cloud? That's today's topic. I'm David Staples, and that's coming right up. So before we start to create all these resources in our AWS demo account, let's talk just a little bit about the AWS infrastructure that's really going to apply to these other cloud providers as well. Google Cloud and Azure both use these same concepts of regions and availability zones. And then, of course, we've got our data centers. So what are these? Well, a data center should be pretty obvious to just about everyone, right? It's basically just a single building. It's got all these computers and servers and networking equipment, the power systems for it, and it's pretty much a standalone type operation by itself, right? So when we're looking at the AWS cloud and the Google Cloud platform and the Microsoft Azure infrastructure, you're going to hear some terms called availability zones. So the idea with an availability zone is that they are a group of data centers potentially. So it can be one data center, but it's one or more data centers is typically how we look at our availability zones. And so these availability zones are going to be a complete setup of power and networking and all the resources that we need. Sometimes just a single data center, just a single building might be just fine. Other times we might need 2 or 3 buildings, kind of like you saw in the video that I posted yesterday. You had all those buildings kind of right next to each other, right? So that would be a single availability zone. So from there, our availability zones are supposed to be separated enough so that if there's some sort of a minor issue in an area, that it should not affect the other availability zones. So just as an example, if you go look at Google Maps, you can pull up the AWS data centers. You can find some of this information publicly. So none of what I'm about to talk about should be super private. But essentially, you can go look up Columbus, Ohio, and actually see some of the different availability zones for Amazon scattered around that city, right? So when we're looking at these availability zones, if something happens in the maybe western side of Columbus, Ohio, then it should not really affect something happening on the eastern side of Columbus, Ohio, assuming that it's a very minor power outage or a truck hit a telephone pole and thus the fiber's laying all over the road. So there's a fiber cut there, or maybe a construction crew dug up a piece of fiber. Hopefully that's not affecting all the other availability zones in that area, and they're still going to be able to deliver whatever cloud services necessary from those locations. Now, sometimes these events are a little bit more disastrous. So you might take a look at things like tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes. They can take out some pretty large swaths of areas as far as the power goes, as far as networking capabilities go. Maybe some really large major fiber connection gets cut. So that could actually take out a pretty large metro area at times. It's not a frequent occurrence, but it does happen. So essentially, these availability zones are grouped into what we call regions. And those regions are much further apart. When you look at the distance from US East 1, which is going to be Northern Virginia, to the Ohio region in AWS, it's far enough apart so that if something was to happen, such as a big tornado or some sort of major storm, it hopefully won't affect both of those locations at the same time. And then, of course, we've got all sorts of other regions all across the globe as well. I know AWS, as of this recording, has, I want to say, at least 32 regions currently. But let's hop into our web browser here real quick and just go take a look. So there's a website that Amazon has very similar to Google and Microsoft's websites talking about their infrastructure. The easy way to get to it that I can always remember is just infrastructure.aws is the URL. So let's just go ahead and go to that URL here in our web browser. You'll notice that it automatically redirects to aws.amazon.com/whatever, right? So when we scroll down here and look at these different regions and availability zones, we can see that Amazon currently has a region coming soon in Canada West. That should hopefully be live here, I would imagine, within the next year or so. But that's going to provide service to the western part of Canada, because currently they only really have CA Central 1, which is kind of right over here, Canada Central they call it here, launched back in 2016. We've also got these 6 other regions here in the United States, 2 of which are going to be your GovCloud East and GovCloud West. So really there's 4 that are publicly available. But if we keep on scrolling down through here, we can see all the various different regions that are available. You can see the different availability zones, or the number of availability zones that they're broken out into, and then get into even some of the more recent announcements. I say recent, in the last couple of years, they've started coming out with things like these local zones and AWS Wavelength. They've had the AWS Outposts for a little bit, which is another product that we'll talk about another day. But I think you guys get the picture, right? So we're not going to spend too much more time on this topic. We're going to go ahead and start creating some infrastructure in our next videos, probably starting off with some EC2 instances, looking at some storage with some of the different storage systems, and kind of continuing to build on that foundational knowledge. So again, you've got these availability zones that are made up of 1 or more data centers. You've got regions that are made up of 2 or more availability zones, and those regions are all across the globe. So I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the description down below for some links that I've put in there. Also, if you've got any questions, be sure to leave those in the comments down below that. If you would also click on that like and subscribe button for me, that helps me out with the YouTube algorithms. But in the meantime, look forward to seeing you guys in a future video. So thanks for watching.